Hi guys, welcome to today's demo. So today I wanted to share some ideas with you using textures around your house. I have been playing with a lot of different textures. When I do clay work actually is when I use a lot of fun texture because it creates some really interesting impressions into the clay. And so in experimenting with playing with polymer clay and epoxy clay, I came across some fun textures that I wanted to share with you. And we're going to do some ideas on paper today versus doing things in clay. But I hope it opens up your mind. It kind of helps you think outside the box a little bit when you're playing with things and textures and looking for fun textures. All right. So first thing I'm going to get started with is something that you guys are probably all already very familiar with. A cellophane bag, like a bag like from I don't know, the vegetable produce section of your store. And I'm going to play with the pigment ink. So pigment ink stays wet a little bit longer, so it holds ink in place, and so then when you're playing with it, you can actually apply to different things. Dye-based ink like Distress ink, this brand, the ink, that will dry rather quickly. So oftentimes when you're playing with something and it has a very porous surface, you want to play with a pigment ink so it stays wet longer. Okay, this is not going to be a porous surface because the ink is going to pretty much stay wet. So either ink would work great for using on plastic, but I like the colors. I feel like the VersaFine Clear ink, the colors are so much more rich. They just look really beautiful. So I'm going to actually play with that. So again, I'm just this random bag. I'm just going to apply some ink here to the surface. I'm just going to kind of spread it across like this. And I'm just going to tell you right now, we're just kind of playing. We're just kind of experimenting because I don't know what's going to happen here when we just do this. So I'm going to grab my hand behind this here so I don't get ink all over me, and I'm just going to press it onto the paper here. Ooh, kind of interesting, kind of a fun, interesting texture. Ooh, I kind of like that. Kind of cool. So just, you know, interesting little textures and things. You never know what you're going to find with that. And then this would be really great for doing collage. Or, interestingly enough, check this out. Let's see if I have any of... So if you happen to have, like, any Pearl-Ex powder, I don't know if you know what Pearl-Ex powder is. It's kind of like a leafing powder. Not really a leafing powder, it's a mica powder, that's what I meant to say. So this is going to be, it's called Interference Gold, but it's kind of like a white. And this will actually bond to any VersaFine Clear inks, even after they've dried. Like this is totally dry to the touch, it's not coming off. But this stuff actually bonds to it and kind of creating this iridescent effect, which is so, so, so cool. So I don't know if you guys can see this when I catch the light here. See how I only put it on this section from right, let's see if I can catch this right here. See how there's that line kind of catching the light right along this edge right here. So that right there, all of that is that Pearl-Ex powder, and it's bonding to wherever that VersaFine Clear ink is. Oh, so, so, so cool. So you can take your texture and do even more with it. And I don't know if you guys know this, but your VersaFine Clear inks also hold embossing powder in place when they're still wet. And so then you can do heat embossing with your texture, which is really cool. So of course it's not the coolest texture, but it is a texture. All right, now we'll play with some of these other fun little things here. So I wanted to talk with you about, this is just super, super weird, but sometimes when I'm needing like a fun, interesting texture in my background, I will actually use a paper towel. I know, that's just super bizarre, but you never know the textures you're going to actually come up with. And it's also really nice if you're just needing something just very basic just as your background. And so I'm just using a paper towel here and I'm kind of just dabbing it on. But you can kind of see, I don't know if you guys can see up there, but I actually have, there's this paper towel actually has a pattern in it, which is so funny because usually when I'm showing this technique, I don't usually pick a paper towel that has texture in it. That's hilarious. Oh, and it's actually just that top side. Oh, that's so funny. Well, again, just using textures. You never know what you're going to come up with. So I'm using two different colors of Distress inks. And if you have a stencil, this is a great time to use your texture in between your stencils. I'm going to kind of lay this down here. when I was doing 5-minute cards actually about a year ago, and for one of my 5-minute cards, I used a paper towel for creating texture on a background. And I remember people were like, "What? You used a paper towel?" And I was like, "Yeah, sometimes it's just a texture that if you're just needing something in the background, and you don't, if you're doing like a collage or you're kind of wanting to start and you're wanting to create more things, you're really gonna need something that kind of makes the background not so stark. And so sometimes doing something like this, but then ripping up the pages and doing a piece of collage art, you can really incorporate some of those really interesting textures into your art. Okay? So that's kind of a fun idea. All right. So now we're going to move on to one of my favorite things, and that is spray ink. Excuse me while I make some noise here. I want to get this down here so then that way as I'm spraying my spray ink all over the place, I'm not just making a huge mess. Alright, so I picked out a few different colors of my Distress ink here, my Distress Oxide Spray Ink. I love these inks. They show up on black paper and white paper, but my favorite part about it is that they have they're vibrant. They're just a bright colored spray. So even if you're, just playing with normal white paper, you get that really beautiful, brilliant color. And Distress Oxide inks actually look even cooler once they've dried. So I'm going to show you that today because it's so much fun. All right. So I have this piece of foil here. So first off, I want to share this with you. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with doing like leaf rubbings. Okay. So I'm going to start out with the inks for a minute. Just a piece of copy paper. Alright. And now I wanted to create some interesting texture here on my surface. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab the edge of my paper towel. I'm going to go with that pattern side in. So I'm going to pick up some of those textures. And I want to pick up some of those wrinkles and stuff underneath. So I'm actually just going to rub this paper towel with the Distress ink we were just using, that purple Seedless Preserves. And you can kind of see how this really weird, interesting texture is kind of coming out. And I just think that's really cool because remember we always did like leaf rubbings as kids? Well, how about finding textures around your house and adding in some fun, interesting things? And then, what would be kind of a fun game is if you made like a little book of textures and gave it to someone like, hey, what do you think this is? What texture do you think this is? And people might be like, oh, probably graphite from outside, or, like we were playing with some of these other things like plastic, and like seeing what people can come up with and be like, what texture do you think I used to create this, or like the paper towel. So you can kind of create some really cool, interesting designs. So what I love about doing textures and texture layering is that you can do so much with this very similar kind of texture, and then you can do collage with those different textures and things that you created. So we're going to get that piece of foil. Move my paper out of the way here. And I want to spray my foil and then do printing onto it, okay? So I'm going to make this a little bit more flat. I'm going to spray my oxide inks directly on it. Now, what's also cool about these oxide inks is if you spray color on top of color on top of color, it doesn't really matter so much because the colors retain their vibrancy. Oh, these inks are so, so, so cool. Okay. All right, so now, I love what's already happening in these colors here. All right, so now I'm going to just flip this over and just press down, and let's just see what happens here. It might be gross, it might be muddy, it might be kind of cool. Oh, actually, it didn't really do very much. Well, let's grab another piece of paper. Let's see what else we can do here. I think this time I'm going to grab a lighter weight piece of paper, and I'm going to go this direction. I really wanted to get in all those little crevices there. I don't want to get my hands too dirty here. I'll wash them. I just want to see the different textures. Oh, that's really interesting. It's not really doing a whole lot, but I'm kind of okay with that. All right, I'm going to crinkle this up a little bit this direction. So that I can go in here and kind of block this down a little bit. Let's kind of smear that just slightly. I think what I'm going to do here So I'm actually going to spray some more ink directly on this. And then do some smishing. That takes a little bit more because I can kind of control how much of the kind of splat kind of look I want. So that's kind of cool. Okay. All right. Okay, so now that we've done some kind of textures, things you probably already thought of. By the way, look what happens here when that distress oxide starts to dry. Look how the edges are dark and the inside is light. Love that about the oxide ink. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some different things. Okay, actually, hold on just. Okay, so you can use things from your kitchen. I'm sure most of you are already very familiar with this technique, but I'm going to show you anyway, because I have to share with you, if you are not familiar with playing with things from your kitchen, you should try it because it's pretty exciting. So you can take, there's just a little mini orange, those little mandarin oranges, happens to be one of the seedless ones. If you cut the your like leftover fruits or vegetables that are kind of like, maybe you don't want to eat it, or you're willing to sacrifice it to art, and you put it in your fridge overnight, you'll get some of those textures that really pop, and they're a little bit drier, so then that way you can apply your inks or your paint to them and it won't look funky. I'm just going to go with it. I just cut these like literally just a little bit ago. And then I just took a towel actually and just pressed them onto this towel and kind of pressed out some of the moisture. The onion, I really do recommend that you sit that out overnight, but we're going to try and see what happens anyway. Okay. So I'm going to use my inks. I'm going to use my spray inks because that way I'm not putting anything directly onto my ink pad like an onion. Don't want to put onion directly on my ink pads. So I'm actually going to spray this. Look how cool this is, you guys. Let's see what happens. Oh my gosh, so cool. I like that there's the less color there is on there, that actually the cooler the effect is. Ooh, I love this blue and green together, or purple and green together. Oh my gosh, so cool. I did a more saturated one, that way it kind of balances out the saturated one I have over here. And again, I was telling you before, but I really love what happens with the distress ink when it dries. It just looks really, really cool. All right, and now I'm going to do my blue here, my orange. Kind of going off the edge in some areas here. And again, you can always do this, like people always do this like wrapping paper, but honestly, I just really like interesting, fun textures for doing art with, because you really never know what you're going to come up with or what you're going to find when you raid your kitchen. All right. And I love the colors that are already happening here, that are just like really coming out here. And then what happens with the purple, isn't that cool? Oh, so fun. I just love weird textures. I love when it happens kind of organically and it's unpredictable. And what I really like to do, I'm going to show you this, is I like adding in the background kind of texture. So you can take the spray that we were just doing and just kind of do like a light spritz over it, and that will kind of bring the whole thing kind of together and make it kind of like more like an art piece that then you can add something else to, or again, add more collage to and kind of create more art to make that effect even cooler. Okay. All right, now we're going to use the onion end. Let's see what happens here. All right, so again, in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and use my spray inks here. I just grabbed a few colors here to play with, just because I really don't know what's going to happen. Oh, that's interesting. Ooh. Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, that is cool. Look, you guys. Oh my gosh, onions are amazing. Love what's happening there. Oh, my hand is just, I recommend if you're using oxide spray inks, maybe use some gloves. It's not like it's going to stain forever, but it is definitely going to stain for a little while. Oops, I got a little smear there, but that's okay. Oh my gosh, these colors are just exquisite. Oh, I can tell you right now that's going to be a little hard to pick up. I'm just going to shove my fingernails into the side of that, which I know is not like the most official thing, but it's going to make it easier to hold. I think I'm actually just going to go in the blue and green tones for these, for my onion here. And I think I'm actually going to leave, I'm not going to do a spray background because I really just love that the onions are the focal point here. I just think that is so, so, so cool. And I messed up my little smear over here. So I'm going to just cover that up with some more onions. Oh my gosh, I just love this texture. This is just so fun. All right. Okay, so the last little texture that I wanted to share with you today is the texture of this towel, which again, I know that just seems like the weirdest thing ever, but you never know what you're going to find when you're trying to create cool textures around the house. So for these ones here, I'm going to use my oxide inks because I love working with my oxide inks. Okay, and so again, the kind of knobbliness of the towel actually creates a really interesting texture. So again, if you're just trying to create kind of a cool texture for your background, this is also a great one to go with. Okay. Now, let's say that you are like me and you were like, you know what, I really want to use this color, but I want to stamp with my onion, or I want to stamp with, you know, my orange, you know, or something weird. Well, I'm going to show you how to do that. Oh, there's a piece of plastic here. Do I have one? Well, this went out to my kitchen. You might want to use a craft mat. I'm going to use this. I'm just going to put some ink onto this surface here. I might want to use a craft specific tool. I literally just grabbed this from my kitchen. But it will clean off. I'm not worried. Okay, so I'm just going to activate my ink here. Okay. Then I'm going to wipe off my onion, the old ink that was on there. And then I'm going to go ahead, pick up my ink here, and stamp it. Let's see what happens. Ooh, get my fun texture. And I get my color that I'm after here. All right, and there we have our cool textures. And then I can have my funky, cool, weird onion thing kind of head off into the distance here. Oops, I'm losing onion. There we go. Kind of like it's getting lighter and lighter. All right, there we are, friends. Hopefully you had lots of fun learning all of the different things about textures from around the house. I know we have really kind of basic textures, weird textures, foil textures, plastic textures. So, hope you guys had fun today. Thanks for joining me for my textures demo. I'll see you guys later.